I would really urge all these young athletes, young people in general, to really figure out your why. Why do you want to be successful? Why do you want to be a great football player? Why do you want to be a great soccer player? Why do you want to be a scientist? Whatever it is. And really defining that, because I think a lot of times everybody just works, but they don't necessarily work with the same purpose that they might if they're really connected to some sort of why. So I think devoting time to that amongst a world where we're so distracted by so many things, most notably the phone, which is my absolutely hate the phone and the diversion and the distraction that it is for the young people of this generation. A big part of how I got started was nutrition. So I started to just read everything that I could find online, just devoured every bit of information regarding nutrition and how it applied to athleticism, even high school players, the way they have access to Huddle now and the way they have so many opportunities to study and there's so many there's so much available information online to improve yourself in so many ways.
You mentioned the phone. The phone is a huge thing.
It is.
Because it was created to take our attention away of achieving something great. And or you can use it as a really good resources. How did you discover your why when you were younger? At an early age, was that instilled in you from like your family, or how do you slowly discover that and make it your own?
Yeah, it's interesting because Yeah, it's interesting that like you, I think you inadvertently just, you work initially and there's very, very, very little planning. There's very little purpose. It's just work, and I think everybody that's had any sort of success, understands that. I think now that I've had a lot of time to really reflect on my journey, but to also put into place, something that's really for my players, for my children, obviously, like creating a process and putting a process that you can replicate. And that's kind of where I've taken, I've taken a journey and now really defined what created the success within that journey. And it's really this process of like heart, mind, fist. And I know this is going to sound kind of hokey, but hopefully this makes sense. But the heart component, and it's as global as looking at it from an organizational standpoint, and it's as singular as a relationship between two people. But the heart piece, I would really urge all these young athletes, young people in general, to really figure out your why. Like, why do you want to be successful? Why do you want to be a great football player? Why do you want to be a great soccer player? Why do you want to be a scientist? Whatever it is. And really defining that, because I think a lot of times everybody just works, but they don't necessarily work with the same purpose that they might if they're really connected to some sort of why. So I think devoting time to that amongst a world where we're so distracted by so many things, most notably the phone, which is my absolutely hate the phone and the diversion and the distraction that it is for the young people of this generation. But so really connect to that why. So that's the heart piece. And the other part of heart is the connection component. Like, I would say from a team perspective, like really encouraging the relationships amongst the team members, and I really believe like if you're playing for yourself, you'll play hard, but if you're playing for the man next to you, especially in times of adversity, and I look to that man, like I refuse to let that man down, and so that's the heart. The heart is the why, your own internal why, and it can be a very personal thing. But then there's also the why from the standpoint of the connection piece and the relationships. And I always try to make everything that we do when we create a process, like a process for success, is making it measurable, so how do I demonstrate my connection to my brother? Well, I show it through strain and finish and effort. And that's very measurable. You can hold people accountable on a daily basis. You can hold yourself accountable on a daily basis when it comes to that. And then the second part is from heart is mind. And the mind piece is really like defining a concrete process of what it's going to take. So I just say, like, from my standpoint, a big part of how I got started was nutrition. So I started to just read everything that I could find online, publications, magazines, just devoured every bit of information regarding nutrition. and how it applied to athleticism. And really, when I was first starting to play, like, not to say that I wanted to be a bodybuilder by any means, but that was kind of the origin of the information that I was attaining, because there still wasn't a ton in the sports world, other than bodybuilding. So collected as much information as far as the nutrition piece was, and then the training piece was, um, and I pushed myself and challenged myself to get in the football world, and absolutely find all the resources I could find regarding speed training, movement training, like specific football training, all that stuff, explosion training, everything. But then I really ventured outside that world too, and spent a bunch of time at American Kickboxing Academy in San Jose, California, where obviously a lot of greats have fought out of there, to really challenge myself outside of this football world from an athletic standpoint, and so that's training, that's nutrition, that's obviously making it as specific as you want to football. That was studying, that was film sessions, that was the way I met, the notes I took, the way I studied on a daily basis. But that's the mind piece, and that's the component of, like, I'm going to create this very specific process. And again, you want this process to be as measurable as possible. So obviously you can measure everything in the weight room. You can measure everything from a nutrition standpoint. You can measure everything from a speed standpoint. So constantly getting feedback from a measurable standpoint. So that's the mind piece. For the mind piece for the football world, for us, is like making sure that, like, we go to meetings, we never come to a meeting blind. So like, I'll always prep guys with a cut up, with specific notes, or whatever the case may be, for what we're putting in that specific day. But that goes, like, you don't need a cut up. You don't need a coach to do that for you. Like, that's making a dedication every day that I'll come to work prepared, and every level of football, you can do that. The way even high school players, the way they have access to Huddle now, and the way they have so many opportunities to study, and there's so many, there's so much available information online too, to improve yourself in so many ways, but so that's the mind piece. And then the last piece is fist, and you can apply that in a lot of different ways. From a purely football perspective, that's the violence in which we play with. And like, the off season, we still have to regard it and talk about it, even though we're not in pads and we're not in helmets, but we're still readying our bodies for the battle that they're going to incur, the punishment that they're going to deliver and take, and their ability to sustain and not only play with that violence, but survive that violence as well, and then it can also be applied from the standpoint of just attacking your process now. So you went through the mind piece, you really created a defined process, how you're going to eat, how you're going to sleep, how you're going to drink, how you're going to recover, how you're going to rehab, prehab, how you're going to regen, all those things. And then you got to put it into place and attack it, That's a lot of talking. I apologize.
No, please don't. That was really good. I feel like when I get to talk to you like this, I get to kind of like learn from this whole wealth of knowledge, and you were able to just like simplify it really well as a really effective communicator, which I appreciate. And what I love is going back to start with why, right? Because if the why is strong, like my favorite quote is like Friedrich Nietzsche. It's like, if you have a strong why, a man can bear any how, right? So it's everything I carry with me the most. So if we have a strong why, then you're gonna make sure you put in the mind component. And I think the mind component is just, like you say, strategies and knowing the process. And the fist is actually execution.
That's right.
At the end of the day, like how I like to tell all my athletes, like, at the end of the day, like, if you just look at yourself as a farmer and you understand why you need to farm, putting food on the table, helping people, then the process is to go out there, plow, plant the seed, water, defense that land, and then from there, just wait, and then take care, of the tree, of the fruit of your labor. So if you make it that simple, we never stray away from whatever distraction is going to be. You mentioned the phone. The phone is a huge thing.
It is.
Because it was created to take our attention away of achieving something great. And or you can use it as a really good resources, right? Like you mentioned before, I'm sure when you mentioned nutrition, I just think about how I used to read like muscle development,
That's right.
muscle and fitness,
Yep.
because that's what it was, right?
That was the only thing available.
Yeah. I want to go back to a couple things. How did you discover your why when you were younger? Because I know you played your sport, like football, wrestling as well, and
Yep.
it seemed like you dabbled in MMA early on. Where now, you know, defensive guys are working on their hands-on movement all the time with like boxing coach and all that stuff. So at an early age, was that instilled in you from like your family, or how do you slowly discover that and make it your own?
Yeah, it's interesting because it was very undefined, especially early on in my career. I think I just had an internal pride where I wasn't going to let anybody outwork me, and I really didn't know why. You know, I didn't. It wasn't until later, and I really connected to that why and the pride that I wanted to bring my family, my wife, my kids, and just the internal pride that I had for the legacy and the reputation that I was trying to create for myself. You know, and then the biggest why for me, outside of my family, was the and I feel like this has been, I got a lot of kryptonites, I got a lot of weaknesses, but I feel like my superpower has always been my ability to connect to those around me, and that's ultimately the why that motivates me on a daily basis, especially when I'm at work. Is the connection I have amongst my teammates, and it's a really unfortunate thing that in this day and age we battle that now with the current the current landscape of just the athlete in America, the amount of self-promotion, the amount of, you know, being so singularly focused on their own branding and their own selfishness, you know, above the team is become so prevalent in sports, especially in this country, that it's we battle it on a daily basis. And that's a big reason why I really am adamant with our team, especially on the defensive side of the ball, about encouraging those relationships and creating those relationships, because it's a dying practice. It really is.
Yeah. So your job is obviously to take young men, rookie, and then transform them into, you know, part of the team, part of the culture that you have set. What are some processes of you embedding that? Like, are you approaching it as in like, hey, here's how you're onboarding, here's how you're gonna, you know, behave, etc., or do you have like a slow process of transforming someone from like day one from draft all the way to, you know, right beginning of the season?
Yeah, there's just so many layers to that. You know, there's just start from the mental perspective, just learning alignment, assignment, technique, all the scheme that we have, all the nuance regarding like just there's a technique and then there's the gray within that technique at times. And so that's the big part of the transition. And then there's the emotional piece of just, they're chasing their dream, as we all know. And there's a lot of expectations, internal pressure. There's a lot of things from an emotional standpoint that you have to deal with. That's another big part of the transition going from college to the NFL. There's the transition of just the athlete that you're dealing with. It's faster, it's bigger, it's stronger, it's tougher in every way, you know. There's a transition from the endurance piece of things, because all of a sudden, you know, a 12 play or a 12 game college season is now 17 plus 3, 20. And then if you go to the playoffs, it's plus 20, whatever that is. You know, that's a thing now. You know, like rookies finish the preseason and they're like, are we almost done? Like we hadn't started yet, you know? So there's so many pieces to that. How we integrate them. I mean, there's obviously from just a scheme standpoint, from a technique standpoint, obviously there's a process, and starting very elementary, starting with the bare basics and building up each player in that way. And then we also have a process of our own as far as like assimilating them into the culture of our building. And the biggest part of that is it's not necessarily what we say to them on a daily basis. It's more just living that life of the culture that we have created, and me making sure that from a defensive perspective, at least from a unit perspective, that's the first thing we speak on a daily basis is our culture and our style. And before I ever put anything in their brain as far as scheme is concerned, but and then just within time, they just, and a big part of that too is, and I can speak for the Jets because I'm here, is we have the best locker room I've ever been around regarding, just especially on the defense side. You can't be an asshole on this defense. You can't be a self promoter. You can't be selfish. You can't, like, you'll stick out too bad. And, and I say that because we have a group that helps those young guys along. They understand that, like, there was a day and age where they were that guy, and they needed help and they needed someone to put their arm around them. And we have a bunch of guys that bring people along with them, not a bunch of mercenaries, which a lot of the NFL is right now.
So when it comes to, let's say, recruiting, right? Because the way I look at sport is that whoever have the best talent with the best culture, the best strategy wins games, right? So as you're evaluating player, what are some key characteristics that you look for beside obviously being technically sound?
Right. Yeah. So first, like that process starts with a profile. So we create a profile for every single position, height, weight, speed, just the generic stuff, and then you really start to create like the non-negotiables regarding physically, because it's a really easy way to cut the fat on long lists of people, because we get whatever. I'll start the draft process with over a couple thousand guys, and each one of those guys, people have to remember that represents 15 to 20 hours of work to really evaluate them. So when you think of it in that way, that's daunting. And for me, who's not necessarily a scout, I'm a coach first, that's virtually impossible. So the profile, it cuts the fat. So it takes a list of 2,500 people, and all of a sudden now it's a list of 250. So now it's a little bit more manageable from that standpoint. And then we look into all the things that you would imagine we look into: the intelligence, and then we have all this cognitive testing, which is brand new, which is very interesting stuff. And it's very, it's proving to be very valuable. There's the obvious, like just FIB, football intelligence, all those, like we do all the stuff that you'd imagine we do. The thing that I've really learned here with the Jets and everywhere I've been, player or coach alike, I don't think we've ever been as dedicated to it as we are here, is we put a huge weight on love for football. And a lot of teams don't. A lot of teams chase talent so hard, and they chase measurables and speed and length and intelligence and cognitive intelligence and all those things and I've done it myself in my career as a coach, and chased talent and thought that I had this, this amazing ability to maybe a guy that didn't love the game to get him to love the game. And I think the one thing that I found is, does that happen sometimes? Yes, you flip a guy, but it's very rare, and by us really assembling a roster in New York of a bunch of players that really love the game and demonstrate that love by the way that they work, it makes it so much more fun to come to work. And it's so much easier to create a culture within the building, because guys aren't there because they have to be there. They're there because they love it and they want to be a part of something special, and they have a real connection with each other, and they have a real connection to this game. And because of that, it's one of the biggest reasons that we've become a pretty good defense.
Yeah. As I'm listening to you, I just finished a podcast with Dana White, and I know you're a big MMA fan like me. He was saying in the early stage of UFC, when it was just bleeding money, he would get up, go to work 9:30 a.m. every single day, leave at 8:30 p.m. He say when they sold the company and he got a big equity earned out, he's like, people stop showing up to work and they just leave. He's like, I still show up at 9:30 every single day with more money now because I get to do what I love every single day. So from a coach's perspective, I think that's huge. And what I also observe, because I get to work with young athletes, and then their parents get to be coaches like yourself. What I love is your ability to bring that home, because your relationship with your kids are phenomenal, because they say nothing but great things about you guys. So I want to give kudos to that. So how do you cultivate that in a household where obviously your job is competitive, is intense, high stress, but you also find time to be there for your family? How do you balance that whole thing out?
Well, I think the biggest part of it for me is my wife, and the fact that I mean, she'll tell you the same that and there's a human nature element to it, but I can get consumed with the game. And um, a lot of people that, and it doesn't have you don't have to be in the NFL to be consumed with football or sport in general, and she does an amazing job of like no football tonight. Like, um, I mean, she just said it to me last night at dinner, like no more football. And I think that's important, and for myself, I need that reminder at times, and because she's been so good about that and consistent about that I think it's allowed me to be a better father. I still could obviously, as we all could, be a much better father than I am. And obviously we're all flawed in our ways, but any success I've had, she's a big, huge part of that as far as the way that we parent our kids.
And then as you're obviously raising your two sons, what are something that you were non-negotiable for you to make sure you instill in them?
I think work is the biggest thing. Like, I want them to find something in their life that they love and then absolutely attack it. I think too often, this generation, every generation, shoot, my generation, we're pushed into some things that we thought were necessary just to pay the bills and to put food on the table, and that was, I think, an overriding mantra amongst a lot of families within the United States, and I'd like to think that our family, we can evolve beyond that, and really find something that feeds our families, but that we love and that we're passionate about, So if there's one thing that I would love for them to really embrace is, don't find the thing that just, that you punch your time clock and you make your money and you call it a day. Make something that inspires you every day to wake up and that you love, that you'll inspire your own children to find something that they love, and hopefully, especially I work in a profession that is very time consuming. Hopefully my kids would tell you that at the very least, they saw their dad do a job that he loved and was passionate about. And hopefully that motivates them and inspires them to do the same in their own lives.
Were there any period in your career where you kind of lost a little bit of love for the game? And then if you did, how were you able to find your way back?
Yeah, I think amongst injury and then obviously there's a business element to professional sports that it can get you frustrated and sideways about certain things. I was fortunate though that I think midway through my career, midway through my 10 years, I had, some injuries that piled up. I'd gone through a couple of negotiations that maybe weren't as favorable as I thought they should have been. So I think there was an element of frustration with my body, the sport, maybe the organization at some times. But I was really fortunate to play long enough to overcome that, and I understood my body at a higher level, and I managed my injuries at a higher level, which ultimately kept me healthier. So, that helped, remove some of my frustration about the physical piece and the pain piece that comes with playing football, especially playing it for a long time. And then from the business standpoint, I just, I came to grips with, it is a business, but at the same time, and I acknowledge and I recognize that, and I acknowledge and recognize it as a coach. I want to have success. I want to make money, and I acknowledge and recognize as a player, like I wanted, to create my own legacy as a player and do amazing things, and that's important, but it's bigger than that. It's bigger than it's bigger than there's a connection piece that I don't want us to ever lose in sport. I don't. And I think we are. And that's why I'm going to bring it up about 47 times today.
Yeah, no, I think it's great because, again, going back to the whole self-serving notion, right? Because, it's really with the NIL being introduced, like kids are more incentivized to promote themselves and put themselves above the team, right? I think like just watching football from afar, you can tell like great dynasty, great team, they always have that, that approach of just chasing greatness nonstop, right? It's just like, oh, let's just go to the next one, right? One of my favorite things to watch is The Last Dance, right? You see like Jordan's coming back. It's like, oh, well, let's get another one. Let's get another one. And then keep raising the average of the team. I think you can only do that if you have a singular focus, which is what kind of greatness do you want to achieve, individually and aligned it with the organization. You allude to your ability to manage, some injuries throughout your 10 years in your career. Like, what was something that you did back then, but it's like a standard now?
As far as
the recovery, injury management, like things you do on your own.
Yeah, I feel like, and I was kind of inspired at the time by Bill Romanowski, and I know that name people can think of it in a lot of different ways, but he was a mentor for me in a lot of ways, and just the way he took care of his body, the way he unturned every stone, as far as recovery, nutrition, training, all of it, pushed the limits as far as they could be pushed. And it was funny because at the time, like all the supplements I was taking, all the massages I was getting, I was getting my blood spun on a regular basis. I was getting so many things done that back then were, a small percentage of the players were doing on a consistent basis, which is mind blowing to me now because they're all doing it now. Mm-hmm. I mean, our building, we spin our players' blood. We evaluate their minerals and their vitamins and all that stuff. We bod pot them on a daily basis. We have massage therapists and in building, we have red light therapy. We have everything. We have acupuncture, we have compression, we have obviously contrast. We have so many things that I feel like the minority were doing, especially early in my career, which are just, it's commonplace now. It really is.
Yeah, I think the obviously the game has changed a lot, right? You as a coach, like what are your ways of keeping up with the changing nature of the game, especially like the speed, athleticism, everything else? Like how are you able to, forego some of your old way of thinking and keep that, that white belt mentality the whole time?
Yeah. I think it's now that I'm a coach and it's less physical for me now and it's more mental, obviously, but it's having the humility to that you never have the answers. And every year, like really fine tooth combing the previous year and what could we do better? How were we attacked? What are we doing well? What are we not doing well? And then really digging in and taking a hard look at what we're teaching, how we're teaching, but at the same time, really exploring, other defenses, especially that we're having, success this year and in years past, and really just, getting a strong understanding of what's going on around the league. I think sometimes as a coach, you can get so caught in that this is what we do, this is who I am, this is my system. And I think that can be, there's power to that for sure, because there's real principles and there's concepts and there's techniques and there's stuff that's non-negotiable, and your guys know it inside and out. And they know it so well that there's a level of unconscious competence when they execute it, because it's just, they do it over and over and over again. And I think there's power in that for sure. But I think there has to be an element in this current NFL that you have a curveball, you have something they're not ready for, you have growth and consistent evolution of your scheme. And that, I have a system, but my system is always growing and evolving. Some coaches are better at that than others. Some coaches have and it's hard, especially when you have a lot of success. It's hard to take a hard look at yourself and think you have to grow even when you're doing really, really well. But I think for myself, it's just constantly challenged. Like, what are we doing? How are we doing it? How are we teaching it? And just creating an environment for the players that is just, it's as good as we can create on and off the field.
Mm-hmm. As you were, transitioned from playing to coaching, what was something that you were like, oh man, this is completely different? How do you switch that mindset from like being on the field? Like for me, right? So if I were to hire someone, I know the things that need to get done. And sometimes it's really hard for me to be like, oh, let me just go do this myself, rather than giving that trust for someone to do it. How do you go ahead and
it's really hard. Yeah. It's the hardest part of the transition, because it was, as a player, you just did, and you demonstrated through your action, how it was supposed to get done. Now you're all of a sudden in this position that you have to explain it, and I think it takes some time to really figure out who you are as a teacher and a communicator. Because as a player, you don't have to be as effective as that, and you can do it physically, and you don't have to do it necessarily. Um, you don't have to teach, and so I would say that was probably one of the biggest part of the transitions. Not only figure out how to teach, but figure out who I wanted to be as a teacher, because I think that's a big part of it. Like, I'm not saying the NFL has the smartest human beings on earth, because I know I'm not, and I'm not even close to that. But I would say this: I think the locker rooms are filled with a lot of very like streetwise people that understand human beings and understand relationships and understand when people are authentic and real. And that's, that's what really separates it. And the last part of the coaching thing too was the hours. I was not ready for. You hear the stories about the hours of coaching, but until you actually do it, it's I've never done well without sleep, and now I have a job that majors in no sleep. So
So with that, right? Because obviously we're gonna have students who cram through exam and all of that stuff. Like, what is something that you guys currently do that keep you mentally charged despite not having the best sleep routine?
it's if my process isn't defined, I have no chance. So I have everything I do is on checklists. If not, I just sit there and spin in circles and I'm not doing anything, so I have to have, okay, from 8 to 8:20, I'm going to watch the first, second down play action tape, check. I watched it. What are my notes on it? From 8:25 to 8:45, I'm going to watch the first, second down run tape, and I'm not saying that's what my process is, but it's like that for me. And if I do that, especially when I'm really tired and I'm really fatigued and I'm, multiple weeks without much quality sleep, like, it keeps me on task. It keeps me going the right direction. And without it, I'd have no chance. I really wouldn't.
Do you spend like off season coming up with like that schedule or that routine for yourself?
Always, yeah. Always reassessing, like, how am I studying the game? How am I creating the game plans? Is it effective? Is it not effective? Is it the most efficient time for not only me, but for our staff, and how we're studying it, and how we're delegating different areas of expertise to different people. And so that stuff is constantly growing and evolving. And same way we challenge our scheme, we challenge our process all the time.
Mhm. So, Jeff, obviously you have tremendous long career. What is a one core memory you have when it comes to football, whether it's playing or coaching?
My favorite one would be the NFC. It was the wild card game against the Giants. I was playing. It was 2002, I want to say. It was the game that gets shown on NFL Network all the time. At the time, it was the biggest comeback in the NFL playoffs, and we came back. I don't know if the jarring between T.O. and Strahan and the botched field goal at the end of the game. Like, there were so many parts of that game that were just so historic and so memorable. And I just remember, because we were getting beat pretty bad early in that game, and a portion of Candlestick at the time kind of vacated. But I'll say this: the people that stayed, it was the loudest I'd ever heard Candlestick to that point. So, really magical moment at the end of that one. My worst memory, which is like, it's like a wound still to this day, is our 28-3 debacle in the Super Bowl in Atlanta. You'll never forget that one.
Yeah, that one's tough. So, walk me through that 0-2 game. When you guys were down that much, how do you keep the fighting spirits going? Right, because that's the hardest thing. Because once you lose the fighting spirit, then it's kind of over.
Yeah, and that's where you just focus on the moment, and that's all you can control. Is we can't win this right now in one play. We can't, but we can win this play, and it's the one day one. It's the same mentality where, like, I can't get everything accomplished in this singular moment, but I can win this moment, and just approach it in that way. And those moments start to stack up, and before you knew it, we were in it, and I still remember Bryant Young, who rarely said anything. That he just obviously got inducted into the Hall of Fame this past year, but I remember him telling the entire defense like they're not going to score again. And for a guy that doesn't say much, for him to say that, and for the man that he was, the teammate that he was, like they weren't going to score any more points. You know.
Awesome. I want to ask you one last question. And so let's say if we were able to put something in a time capsule that, let's say, your grandchildren is able to open it 50 years from now, what would that be and why?
That's a hard one. Have you asked that before?
No.
I'm trying to think of what are some areas that you could go into with that. I don't know, maybe just my wife and our rings, maybe, you know, and just a reminder of our relationship and our family and how it started and the legacy we've created.
No, it's a great question. Great answer. No. Jeff, thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely.
My pleasure. I'm so happy you're able to, you know, bless us with your time, the time you have. Thank you for the knowledge, your love for the game. I think whoever listened to this, if they share the same passion with anything in life as you share with football, I guarantee that they're going to find success along the way, just like you have.
I appreciate it, man. Thank you.
Thank you so much.